Hey folks, we're taking a look at whether or not tables and graphs that are given to us are a function or just a relation. And basically what's happening here is that we know that a function is a rule that relates to two quantities. You know, there's an input and there's an output. And we talked about that a little bit. We filled out the table, we graphed it. So now let's go back and look at that relations definition that we took out there. Relations, they're simply a set of x's and y's, but they're not always functions. Okay? And if we look down a little bit further on the table, they start giving us, excuse me, a little bit further down the page, they give us these tables and the graphs, and they say, are these relationships, are they a function? Is this relation a function? Yes or no? And then explain. So I say let's turn this into a story. So let's get away from our notes for just a second, and let's just remember that relations are simply a set of x's and y's. But relations can't function when someone cheats, right? So if we pretend that each number is a person and each XY pair is a quote, quote, couple, we're going to be able to come through here and make sense of this with a story. Okay, it's not math, but it'll get us the answer every time. Then we'll come back for the math later. 0 is going out with 5. So 0 walks in with 5 at a restaurant. And we see them. I go, okay, they're a couple. 1 walks in with 4, so they're a couple. 2 walks in with 3, and 6 walks in with -1. We go, gee, that's a little bit of an odd situation, but we don't think about it. You know, we assume that they're stand-up people. They won't cheat on each other. We think. But remember, relations are simply a set of x's and y's. So when we see this xy table here, that is a set of x's and y's. But relationships can't function when someone cheats on their significant other. So if you see an XY table, you're going to say that's a relation, guaranteed. But there's a chance that they have good relationships. And that means that it will continue to function, and that means that they'll be able to stay together. It means that that relationship will work. But if someone's cheating, that's it. So let's go take a look at this. If we don't see an X cheating, we assume the relationship functions, that it works, and we would say, hey, it's a function. And so that's no problem. And so let's go take a look at this, and let's just say that we were sitting in a restaurant and we saw 0 walked in with 5 right here, and we go, okay, no problem. But then 0 got up and left, and then before we left, we saw 0 come walking in with a totally different person. And just from observing, we went, this is not good. It looks like 0 is actually cheating on 5. Oh yeah, that's definitely cheating there. So 0 is out with 4, but 0 is supposed to be with 5. That's cheating. Do you think that relationship is going to work? No, that relationship cannot work. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So is this XY table a function? No, that relationship can't function because 0 is a cheater. So it's not a function. So what about this one? We come in and we sit down, we order, and we just start looking around at all the couples in the restaurant. Do we see anybody that got up and left and come back in to the restaurant with another person? Just focus on the X's. Don't even worry about the Y's. Just focus on the X's. Do you see anybody? Oh, ooh, yeah, the ones. The one repeated. So let's see if 1 is cheating. So when we first came in, 1 was with 10. Then 1 got up and they left. And then 1 came back. Now, if I drop that gray box and we see a 10 next to it, that means 1's not a cheater, and that means that everything's going to work out okay, and this relationship will function, and it will be a function. If I see something that's not a 10, that relationship is over, right? Oh, I was really pulling for 1, but that's the problem right there. 1 is cheating on 10 with 7, so that relationship will not function. This is not a function. Let's go back to our notes and see if we can kind of clean this up. So, don't worry about the graphs right now. Determine if each relationship represents a function. Okay, when you look at that XY table, please, 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 please make sure that you're only looking at the X's right there. So your eyes go, boom. Did 0, 1, 2, or 3 come back in again to the restaurant? No. So we cannot assume that any of those guys are cheating. And so we would say, yes, each input has 1 output. In other words, that means 0 is going to be faithful to 5 in this scenario, 1 is going to be faithful to 4, 2 is going to be faithful to 3, that sort of thing. But we're just looking at the x's to see if they repeated. Now, let's go over to the second table right there. Do you see it's 0, 2, 6, and 2? Those are all of our x's. That's where our eyes are going to. Did any of those guys come back in? Better believe it. Now, 2 came in with 4 the first time. Well, here's the problem. 2, 1 out, got rid of 4, we assume, somehow, and then came back in with 7. I'm sorry, that relationship's not going to work out. And so the input 2 has more than one output. Now you could say, why is it not a function? You could just say the inputs have more than one output, and that would do it. But I just want to draw your attention to the fact it's 2 that's actually repeating there, and it's got 2 different outputs. And so that's what we're looking at there. How about we go take a look at graphs? We use this thing called vertical line test. And so we're going to get away from our notes for just a second to explain this too. If we're asked to determine if a graph is a function or not a function, we use this trick called a vertical line test. And what it looks like is that we literally just have this vertical line that we have in our brain. You can even use your finger or your pencil, and you run it across the paper there. There we go. I'll get it right here in just a second. So now, if we just take this vertical line right here, this red line, right, and we just wave it across the paper here. If it bumps into the graph, and I don't mean that the y-axis or the x-axis, but in this case it's like this oval. Do you see that it's hitting in multiple spots right here and right here? Yeah, it's hitting in 2 spots. Or do you see that it's hitting in 2 spots right here? I mean, it's just any place that you can draw a vertical line and it hits in more than one spot, that means that it has failed the vertical line test. And that means very simply it is not a function. We'll talk about why in just a second. So which of these graphs is not a function? It's definitely A. If we came over and we checked on B right here, do you see how, like, when I slide this through, do you see this part of the graph, that red line is only touching one spot at a time on there? That means it's passing. Same thing over here. See, when we start this part of this function graph over here, it's only touching one spot at a time on it, so it means that B is a function. Meanwhile, over here on A, not a function, not a function. It's just, as soon as you see that it's touching in more than one spot at a time, it's not a function. Look at C right here. It's passing, it's passing. Yeah, no problem. It's only touching one spot at a time. Let's look at D. Yeah, it's only touching one spot at a time. And so I would recommend just going left to right, and as soon as you see that it's hitting more than one spot, you go, hey, not a function. So A is not a function there. Let's go back to our notes now, and we'll take a look at our graph, and let's just go do the vertical line test here. Do you see right here, it's touching here and here. I know that it has flunked, and so is this graph of a function, well, excuse me, is this graph of a relation, set of x's and y's, is that a function? No. And if we wanted to go through and explain why, it's not too hard. And in fact, let's just go ahead and move this vertical line right over here to the y-axis on here. Can you see it's touching in more than one spot, so it fails? We know that. Look at these 2 spots right here. This is the x-axis, and right here is at 0. So 0 is going out with positive 3, but it's also going out with negative 3. And this is why it works right here, okay? 0 is going out with 3, but 0 is also going out with negative 3, so 0 is a cheater. I'm sorry, this relationship cannot work. But rather than having to go make a XY table, we just run our vertical line right over, see? And we can see that 1's a cheater. We can see that, excuse me, negative 1's a cheater. Negative 2's a cheater. 3's honest. Negative 3 is honest. 1's a cheater. See how x is 1, so it's cheating with this person and this person. And that's what the vertical line is showing us there, okay? It doesn't matter where it hits, it's just if it hits more than once. It's not a function because that would indicate that some of the inputs at least have more than one output.